Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to start in just a moment after we add all the folks from the waiting room. All right. So I think we're ready to kick off. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Felicia Cashew from the NIH Common Fund in the Office of Strategic Coordination in the Division of Program Coordination, Planning, and Strategic Initiatives, or DPCIPSI. I'm hosting today's technical assistance webinar on the research opportunity announcement, the ROA, on integrating clinical research into primary care settings through network research hubs.
The research opportunity announcement number is OTA 24016.
Joining me today also are Amy Patterson, Dr. Patterson from DPCIPSI as the Scientific and Medical Director of the effort to integrate clinical research in primary care, and Christina Falk, who is the Senior Advisor for Program Administration and Policy at the NIH Common Fund. Next slide. So just some housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded today. All participants except speakers will be muted and remain muted. Please use the Q&A module for questions that will be answered either in the Q&A box or during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation. The recording from today's webinar will be posted on the Common Fund website later. Next slide. In today's webinar, I will share some opening remarks and provide an overview of the ROA.
Welcome and opening remarks are at 12 p.m. Overview of ROA, integrating clinical research into primary care settings through network research hubs, a pilot, OT2, is at 12:05 p.m.
Then we'll have a question and answer session before some closing remarks at the end of the hour.
Questions and answers are at 12:35 p.m. Closing remarks are at 12:55 p.m.
Next slide. So in recent years, the United States has been experiencing trending declines in health that are disproportionately occurring in medically underserved and disadvantaged populations. Many of these sectors of the populations are also underrepresented in clinical research. So our effort is planning to address a major barrier to participating in clinical research, the lack of access or availability of clinical studies.
Text on the slide reads, "Decline is steepest among the underserved and underrepresented."
In addition, the majority of Americans have never talked to their doctor about participating in research. So there's a critical need to extend research participation opportunities to communities underrepresented in research and to integrate those opportunities in settings where people seek care. Next slide. So therefore, NIH is establishing a new Common Fund program that will build an NIH network for research in primary care settings. This will be a coordinated cross-NIH infrastructure that integrates innovative research into routine clinical care in primary care settings. The network will support primary care-based clinical research in mission areas spanning prevention and treatment, establish a foundation for sustained engagement with communities underrepresented in research, and implement innovative study designs that address common health issues, utilizing the full range of clinical research designs to inform clinical practice. Ultimately, the NIH envisions that this will facilitate and accelerate research advances for broader adoption and implementation into everyday clinical care, improving health outcomes and advancing health equity for all Americans. Next slide. So our timeline, we obtained Council of Council clearance for this Common Fund program in early April, and then shortly thereafter set up a number of listening sessions to obtain input from perspectives from external partners like patients, patient advocates, community organizations, primary care providers, and researchers to inform our planning. We are hosting a public workshop next month on June 7th, where we will share what we heard from the listening sessions and also hear from Dr. Bertagnoli herself on her vision of how this network will benefit the health of all Americans. We'll be sharing more information about this public workshop very soon, and including we'll be responding to folks who signed up in the registration process to agree to receive updates about our efforts.
Text on slide reads, Quick launch in 2024, expand existing studies to increase engagement with underrepresented populations and to enhance accrual and collaboration. Expand in 2025 and beyond. Launch new studies across the network and further establish and solidify the network infrastructure.
So because this is a high priority for NIH, we have a rigorous timeline. We plan to launch this effort as a pilot by engaging in this fiscal year a small number of organizations who are already part of research networks to expand the enrollment efforts of existing studies and enhance accrual, engagement, and collaboration. We'll expand next year and beyond if we're successful and launch new studies and further establish the infrastructure. Next slide. The infrastructure will be developed and guided by a scientific medical director, Dr. Amy Patterson, and an operations director who has yet to onboard at NIH. The components anticipated to be piloted in this infrastructure include a clinical science center that will be led by the scientific medical director. This center will be hosted out of NIH and provide oversight of the studies and protocols that are supported, selecting sites and studies, providing statistical and data management support, developing and implementing innovative clinical study designs and strategies. There will also be an operations center that will be led by the operations director, again, out of the NIH. And this center will be responsible for conducting feasibility assessments, supporting site agreements and contracting, supporting study operations like protocol development, regulatory compliance, communications, training, data monitoring. The infrastructure will also have independent review and monitoring boards, such as data and safety monitoring boards, as well as a central IRB. We'll also have a focus on a very strong focus on community engagement to provide support, advice, and resources, in part through partnerships with existing entities like the Community Engagement Alliance, or SEAL, to facilitate sustained partnership and community engagement and community-driven research. As well, industry partnerships, we envision longer term to engage for-profit partners to collaborate, share knowledge, and potentially participate in the infrastructure. And finally, the network research hubs that are highlighted here, which is the focus of this research opportunity announcement, the ROA. These hubs will be responsible for partnering with clinical sites to conduct research in primary care settings. Next slide. So the research network research hubs will be responsible for conducting research in primary care settings in collaboration with clinical sites, starting out with select existing NIH studies and developing new studies as with success and as the infrastructure is established. They'll be responsible for providing clinical research oversight and leadership of their partners, identify and recruit primary care providing organizations to serve as clinical sites, enroll eligible participants in clinical studies, provide complete, accurate, timely data collection, biosamples as required by the selected study, develop new study ideas that are informed by the needs of the local community and respond to requests for study feasibility assessments, and ensure that aggregate research results and/or final study findings are shared with study participants. In terms of participant and community engagement, their network research hubs are expected to increase and sustain the involvement of research participants, patients, patient advocates, and community engagements as partners in research. They'll manage unintended consequences and/or breaks in community relationships, evaluate engagement efforts for continuous improvement and sustainability, and share approaches and strategies for effective community engagement and building a community practice. In terms of implementing innovations in clinical study designs, the network research hubs will be expected to apply and execute innovations across the landscape of clinical research designs to minimize the burden of research on participants and clinical staff. They'll be optimizing study designs to increase research equity and accessibility in real-world healthcare settings, while also maintaining scientific rigor. And they'll facilitate clinical site movement towards a learning healthcare system, accelerating the adoption and implementation of evidence into practice. And finally, they'll be expected to participate as part of this coordinated infrastructure to support research in primary care settings. They'll be expected to be collaborative and supportive by contributing to the development of policies and procedures, accept and implement policies and procedures that are approved as the infrastructure is developed, actively participate and cooperate with quality assurance, study oversight and study monitoring efforts, and interact with and collaborate with other primary care and clinical research networks to share best practices and leverage other capabilities. Next slide. So we planned to launch this infrastructure this year as a 2-year pilot. In year 1, we will select and fund research hubs through this ROA to support participation in existing NIH-funded studies. They will be expected to enhance study accrual of those existing studies and ideally enhance the representation of participants of those studies. These initial studies may be interventional or observational, but are expected to be suitable for primary care settings. In year 2, we expect to support new research that is driven by the needs and priorities of the communities served by the clinical sites. These studies will require coordination with other components of the infrastructure and approval by the scientific and medical director and the operations director. These studies will also be expected to be funded from external sources for all study aspects not covered by this ROA and the coordinated infrastructure. Towards the end of the second year, NIH will conduct an evaluation of the program to assess which approaches and efforts are working, and we may expand, pivot, or sunset awards and/or components based on the results. Next slide. We anticipate issuing 2 to 5 awards this fiscal year from this ROA with a total budget of about $5 million. Next year, we estimate approximately $20 million will be used for network research hubs. The total number of awards and funding will be contingent on programmatic objectives, performance of award recipients, and importantly, availability of funds. Next slide. So you all may have noticed the eligibility criteria is limited for this ROA. In order to jumpstart activities, the initial network research hubs will be limited to organizations that are also part of existing clinical research networks. The IDEA CTRs, the CTSA program, and/or PCORNet. So this would be organizations that are funded as a parent awardee or a sub-awardee of those organizations in an active award state. Organizations with awards and no-cost extensions from these programs are also eligible. Organizations must also be from states where at least 25% of its census tract are defined as rural, according to the revised Rural Urban Commuting Area Codes, or RUCA codes 4 through 10. And those states that are qualify and meet that criteria are shown here. And they're also listed on the FAQ of the ROA on the Common Fund website.
The following states are those that meet the eligibility criteria of those with greater than 25% rural census tracts per the revised 2010 RUCA codes 4 through 10. Idaho, Iowa, Kansas, Kentucky, Maine, Minnesota, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Mexico, North Carolina, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Oregon, South Dakota, Tennessee, Vermont, West Virginia, Wisconsin, Wyoming. For the purposes of this ROA, rural areas are defined according to the Office of Management and Budget and Federal Office of Rural Health Policy, FORHP, definitions, where primary rural urban commuting area, RUCA, codes between 4 and 10 correspond to rural areas and primary RUCA codes 1 to 3 correspond to urban areas.
Foreign institutions and components are not eligible. Next slide. So all application components should be uploaded in ERA Commons in searchable PDF format with the appropriate font size, and margins. The components of the application should be loaded as separate attachments.
Text on slide reads, Project Plan, Technical Approach, up to 6 pages. Subsection A, Overview and Organization. Subsection B, Developing and Implementing Studies and Use of Innovative Designs. Subsection C, Participant and Community Engagement. Primary Care Research Experience, up to 6 pages. Environment and Resources, up to 3 pages. Leadership Plan, 1 page. Budget, estimated baseline costs of adding a select and limited number of primary care clinical sites to existing studies, where the operational aspects are covered by other NIH awards. Budgets are expected to be negotiated as the initial study is selected before an award is issued. Include costs for community partners to be fully engaged and successfully participate in research prioritization, design, and implementation.
And should be titled as specified in each section with the specified page limits. The deadline is not on this slide, but the deadline is a hard deadline, ambitious deadline of June 14th at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. There are thorough descriptions of what should be covered in each section of the ROA in the ROA itself. Next slide. But I will cover a little bit here, the project plan and budget. So applications must include a project plan that clearly and fully demonstrates the applicant's abilities, understanding, and experience to accomplish the objectives of a network research hub. The technical approach should have include an overview and organization of the hubs that outline the network research hubs and the partnering clinical sites. This should include how the hub is affiliated with one of the clinical research networks mentioned before, the IDEA CTRs, CTSAs, or PCORNet. Should include a diagram or map showing the geographical relationships between all entities in the application, and a listing of the underrepresented populations and communities that the hubs will serve. The section should also include plans to describe plans to collaborate with NIH-funded investigators, other network research hubs, and the other components of the infrastructure, and share how the hub plans to contribute to the development of policies and procedures associated with the infrastructure.
Text on slide reads, Project Plan, Technical Approach, up to 6 pages. Subsection A, Overview and Organization. Subsection B, Developing and Implementing Studies and Use of Innovative Designs. Subsection C, Participant and Community Engagement. Primary Care Research Experience, up to 6 pages. Environment and Resources, up to 3 pages. Leadership Plan, 1 page. Budget, estimated baseline costs of adding a select and limited number of primary care clinical sites to existing studies, where the operational aspects are covered by other NIH awards. Budgets are expected to be negotiated as the initial study is selected before an award is issued. Include costs for community partners to be fully engaged and successfully participate in research prioritization, design, and implementation.
The technical approach should also identify areas of research that the Network Research Hub would like to pursue if successful in the first year with implementing expansion of an initial existing NIH study. It should include a description of the criteria that will be used and a process by which studies will be identified and that are a priority of and or co-developed by their community. The section should include a description of innovative and novel solutions to address challenges with integrating research into primary care settings and approaches to minimize the burden of research on participants and clinical staff. And importantly, share the team's expertise and experience with operationalizing these types of solutions. The technical approach should also define the framework along a continuum of practices with plans to engage diverse participants, patient advocates, and communities early in and throughout the research process, from prioritization and planning to dissemination and implementation, and plans to sustain the engagement. Engagement here being defined from outreach, recruitment, partnering in return of value, the broad definition of engagement here. And especially how plans to sustain engagement with those populations typically underrepresented in research. This section should illustrate the team's expertise in implementing related plans through recent examples and experiences, and clearly describe how the hub will solicit and understand the challenges and health needs of the community. We'll also want to hear about flexibilities in study designs, features, and engagement plans that can be adapted to meet the needs of a variety of participant groups and community partners, especially those that are underrepresented in research. The primary care research and experience section should include a description of up to 3 current or recently completed multi-site clinical studies in primary care settings that the Research Network Hub has led with one or more of the proposed clinical sites. And there's a priority here on studies serving rural areas. The applicant should also list additional previous relationships and or partnerships with the proposed clinical sites to provide evidence supporting the likelihood of successful collaborations on future research. In environment and resources, we would like for you to characterize the proposed clinical sites, describe the collective catchment area of the potential research participants through geographic boundaries, quantify the proportion of the catchment area as being rural versus urban in alignment with the RUCA codes 1 through 3 as being defined as urban and 4 through 10 as being defined as rural, and share unique features that facilitate accrual of populations underrepresented in research. And a note here, the rural participant catchment area is not limited to the applicant organization's state. The leadership plan should be presented that identifies and describes the governance of the hub and the clinical sites, chain of responsibility for decision-making, and processes for conflict resolution, a succession plan that identifies substitute or backup investigators should be included to ensure programmatic continuity. Regarding the budget should include a 12-month base period with a 12-month option and should cover baseline costs of adding a select and limited number of primary care clinical sites to enhance the accrual of existing studies where the operational aspects of those studies are covered by other NIH awards, presumably central IRB, data management. The budgets are expected to be negotiated as the initial study is selected during the negotiation process before an award is issued, understanding that applicants do not yet know what types of support are covered by those existing NIH-funded studies. We are also emphasizing that applicants should include costs for community partners to be fully engaged and successfully participate in the research process from prioritization and design to implementation. Next slide. So in terms of objective review, applications will not be evaluated against each other during the review process, but rather on their own merit. Reviewers will be asked to write critiques who are subject matter experts in clinical research, design, implementation, oversight. They will document the strengths and weaknesses of responsive applications in accordance with the review criteria. Applications may be triaged for review based on the number of applications received and the proposed catchment area of potential research participants, prioritizing greater proportions of catchment area being from the rural areas. NIH will not provide feedback on applications and won't accept an appeal of the objective review process or funding decision outcomes. The review criteria are the potential for the proposed hub to contribute to the coordinated infrastructure for supporting research in primary care settings, capabilities and experience, and resources and environment. Next slide. And in terms of the potential to contribute to the coordinated infrastructure for supporting research in primary care, reviewers will be looking at the approach of the proposed research hub. Does it have a high likelihood of meeting the objectives of a network research hub? Does the application describe adequate plans for collaboration with other components of the coordinated research infrastructure? Are the proposed activities involving engagement? Do they follow a comprehensive framework facilitating early and sustained engagement with a diverse group of individuals and communities, especially those that are underrepresented in research? Do the plans to engage the community, will they be likely to successfully support a community-driven research agenda and research studies that are important to the communities that are being served? Do the leadership plans support and does the clinical site partnerships demonstrate a high commitment to the success of the proposed research hub? In terms of capabilities and experience, the reviewers will be asked to look at if the applicant has demonstrated a track record of successfully implementing research in primary care settings in the recent past. We're looking at prior experience that showcases the ability to access and partner with underrepresented individuals in clinical research, and evidence of prior partnerships or relationships with the proposed clinical sites. Do key personnel have the sufficient and relevant expertise to support the activities of a research hub? In terms of resources and environment, we will be looking at affiliation with an existing research network, the IDEA CTR, CTSA, PCORNet. Does that affiliation increase the site readiness to rapidly launch as a new site for existing NIH-funded studies? Does the catchment area provide a high likelihood of facilitating engagement and study accrual of populations underrepresented in research with a priority on individuals from rural communities? Next slide. So upon the completion of the objective review, NIH will assess the critiques and select up to 6 viable applications to move forward into negotiations for a potential award. Negotiations with potential awardees will involve selection of the initial study that is already funded by NIH, to which the Network Research Hub will serve as an additional enrollment site. It will require coordination with the NIH team overseeing those studies to understand the needs and existing support for the studies, and to develop a final budget and milestone plan for the first year of the Network Research Hub. And final award selection will involve assessment of applications with successful negotiations and review and approval by NIH leadership, and development of objective milestones as agreed upon by the NIH and the applicant. The level of funding for any awards made will depend on the negotiated studies and milestones and availability of funds. Next slide. So awards issued from this ROA will be other transaction agreements. They are a special type of legal instrument. They're not contracts, grants, or cooperative agreements. And they're not subject to the federal acquisition regulation, the FAR, or they're not also subject to the grant regulation or NIH grant policy unless other specified in the ROA or terms of the award. Each award will be assigned an OT agreement officer who will be responsible for legally committing funds and taking award actions on behalf of the government. There will be an assigned OT agreement specialist who will serve as the first line contact with applicants and award recipients, as well as an OT program official for day-to-day programmatic oversight, and potential subject matter experts to assist the program official in scientific and technical discussions with awardees. Next slide. OT awards issued under this program may include special award terms around lower tier agreements, whereby sub-award changes must be completed in consultation with NIH. We'll negotiate milestone-based work plans with operational milestones, completion criteria, and expected start and end dates, for example, around participant enrollment targets. We will also include special award terms around enhancing diversity, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility in the research community to encourage award recipients to facilitate engagement with diverse research partners, to enhance the participation of individuals from groups who are underrepresented in the biomedical workforce.
Text on slide reads, Lower tier agreements. Award recipients will be expected to issue subawards to entities identified in their applications and approved by NIH under this ROA. Any changes to subawards must be in consultation with NIH prior to adding or removing partners. Milestone-based work plan. A milestone-based work plan will be requested and negotiated prior to award for inclusion in the OT agreement. The work plan should include a description of operational milestones, completion criteria, and expected start and completion dates. Enhancing diversity, equity, inclusivity, and accessibility in the research community. Award recipients will be encouraged to diversify their staff populations to facilitate engagement with diverse research partners and to enhance the participation of individuals from groups that are underrepresented in the biomedical, clinical, behavioral, and social sciences, such as those defined in Notice of NIH's Interest in Diversity, https://grants/files/NOT-OD-OD-20-031.html.
Next slide. So our timeline is rigorous. We published the ROA just a week ago and are having the technical webinar today as a first technical webinar. We will be hosting a second technical webinar next week. The applications are due on a very rigorous timeline. We are aware of that. June 14th, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We will estimate around 2 weeks for a review period, and throughout July and August, estimate spending a good amount of time negotiating with potential awardees, selecting an existing NIH study to start out with and negotiating milestones. And so the earliest start date for awards is expected to be around mid-September. And no late applications will be accepted. Next slide. So at this point, we'll focus on some questions. If you have a question, please use the Q&A module, and we will go through some of the questions appear to have already been answered, but the ones that remain to be answered, we will discuss. So the first question, will NIH identify the clinical trials, or do we, as an individual site, identify the trials? So for the first year, NIH will be selecting a set of clinical studies that will be chosen from to start off with. So we expect to have a set of 10 or so, maybe more, studies for sites that enter into negotiations to choose from, and we will be negotiating from those pre-specified list of studies in the first year. For if the site is successful at adding accrual to those existing studies, we will move to potentially supporting new studies, and the site is expected to work with the community to understand the priorities and needs, the clinical needs of the community, to propose new studies in the second year. Can you please confirm the state of New York is not eligible? I am confirming the state of New York is not eligible. If the academic research institution is in the rural area, can the for-profit startup be in California? I'm not really sure what the question is referring to. Trivati, maybe you can submit a revised question. For this ROA, applicant organizations who would be the prime applicant are limited to states from the list that was shown earlier, just to prioritize supporting areas that have typically been underrepresented in research and serving rural communities. To clarify, will NIH, I've already answered that question. Sorry. If your state is not listed, but the sites that are enrolled in your network are record codes 9, could we be deemed eligible? So again, we are focusing on organizations from states that are more predominantly rural serving states, understanding that there are many states that have rural communities, even if the census tract doesn't meet the 25% threshold. I will add that we're starting small as a pilot, and we have decided to prioritize rural serving organizations, but this limitation will not likely persist in future opportunities. To clarify, here's another question. To clarify, the primary care research experience doesn't require rural sites. It's just preferred, but that is correct. How are the existing NIH-funded studies identified? Do we propose those? Can we only propose to join or expand studies that we are already the prime site for? So for the first year, the NIH, we have worked across institutes to have a list of study nominations from all institutes of which studies would be candidates to start out with. And so we have a list of existing NIH funded studies that needs to be that will be offered to applicants who enter into negotiations. In the future, in the second year, the infrastructure, if successful in the first year, the network research hubs will be expected to propose new studies that are driven by the priorities of the community, and we expect that there would be external funding to support those exact studies. The next question, are amounts available for funding in direct costs or total costs? Is there a start date for year one? The costs in the ROA are total costs, and we expect awards to be issued in September of this fiscal year, and that would be the start date, September 2024. Is the expectation that the hub will also enroll in the trials, even if located in the academic medical center, understanding that the other enrolling sites will be primary care sites outside of the academic medical center? I think that that this was not specified in the ROA, and the priority here is to increase representation of those groups that have been typically underrepresented in research. So however applicants propose to address that, we would be willing to entertain. But again, this effort is about integrating research in primary care settings as well. So just keeping that in mind. Just to confirm, the budget for the existing NIH funded studies that the research network hubs will join will be set after the hubs are established. So we have a very ambitious plan to select the existing NIH funded study during the negotiation phase this summer. So our plan is to, throughout the July and August timeframe, to work with applicants who reach the negotiation phase, and in coordination with the NIH team who is overseeing the selected NIH funded studies to bring those together. So that is the goal. It's ambitious. We may have some backup plans to continue that process if we are if we are unable to complete that process by September, when we expect to issue awards. Can a single CTSA or IDEA CTR entity support more than one application? We did not address that in the ROA, and that is one that I think we might have to take back and respond to through an FAQ on the website. A tentative answer would be that organizations can submit more than one application as long as they're distinct and separate. And maybe I could call on Christy or anyone else from the team to weigh in on that tentative answer, or Dr. Patterson. Anything to add to that tentative answer?
I do not have anything to add.
Yeah, I think you answered it well, Felicia. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll go with that organizations can submit more than one application as long as they're distinct, and we will add that to the FAQ to the website. Will there be some specific pediatric studies under this infrastructure, or will this be primarily adult studies? This is a good question. We do have some pediatric studies that could be considered for the first year. So at least where we are now, the plans are not to be completely restrictive to adult studies, but that will be worked out during the negotiation phase. Can we learn more about the initial NIH selected studies? Will be stated they'll be suitable to be conducted in primary care. However, the suitability is pivotal to the success of the initiative. This is a great question and a great think that applicants will need to be considered, but we are not really able to answer and provide more detailed information about the select NIH funded studies. So given that big unknown, we do know that the budget is going to be really dependent on what studies are selected in this first year. So the review process will proceed with that level of ambiguity, the understanding of that level of ambiguity. In terms of operationalizing that and understanding what resources and partnerships and staffing you might need for a specific type of study, again, will be heavily negotiated in the negotiation process. Amy, anything else to add to that?
No, I wish we did have more details to offer at this juncture, but I think that's right. And we're highly sensitive about the importance of considering practicality, not overburdening the site. So this negotiation period will be critically important in reaching a mutually agreeable decision about which studies are selected. I think you answered it well, Felicia.
So the next question, I believe, is similar to previous question. Could we be considered qualified even if the network center is not rural, but the sites that are enrolled in the network are record code 9? Again, acknowledging that there are plenty of organizations from states that don't meet the census tract criteria, but this is how we were able to hone in on really prioritizing organizations as well who might have been underrepresented in research in the past. So for this initial rollout, we are limited to the organizations in the states that are meeting the criteria listed in the ROA. Future opportunities, again, aren't planned to be similarly limited. In future years, for example, year 2 with $20 million, will there be opportunities for other networks to be funded, or will it be the only the original 2 to 5 awards funded in year 1? This is also a great question. We are hoping that new networks will be funded in the next year with the $20 million. It will be contingent on the awards selected this year, success of those award recipients, programmatic objectives, and the availability of funds. So there is a possibility that new networks would be starting next year as well. What if the prime applicant is not in a rural state, but we are a coordinating center of many institutions that include those in rural states? Yeah. The eligibility criteria does require that the prime to be from the rural state. The partners could be included on that prime application, but the prime applicant is required to be from one of those rural states listed. Some sense of the type of research planned for year 1 would be helpful in planning the application. Would it be possible to get more information of what type of research is planned? Again, not really able to answer that question right now. Just going back to the assumptions and ambiguous answer that the studies would be suitable for primary care settings, not requiring specialty equipment or specialty type of care necessarily. Okay, this is a long question. So I'll just go ahead and read it. Do we need to have specific sites that we are adding to our currently funded sites for year 1, or would it be enough to recruit our currently funded sites into the hub and propose additional sites that we could be negotiating with to join? In other words, do we only need to have a plan for recruiting additional sites for year 1, and then funding in year 2 would be contingent on adding more sites? So I think what what we're looking for in this first year, we really want to be able to jumpstart activities. And so we would like for you to bring into the application for the first initial study partners that you've likely worked with. We want to see that there's evidence of this partnership, that they could be quick to get up and running. And in the second year, we definitely would like to see broadening of that and using, you know, the approaches and methods that you include in your application of how you engage the community in bringing on community sites additionally in year 2. That is acceptable. Okay, so yeah, some specific questions. So Pennsylvania is not on the list, and I think there's a question about better understanding the calculation. So Mylinda, I'm happy to talk with you offline, but this is based on the census tract analysis and percentage of the census tract meeting the RUCA codes 4 through 10. So it's based on the census tract, not of the state. The ROA asks for letters of interest and support from each of the proposed clinical sites. Does that mean we should ask for letters of support from each individual clinic and health system that is part of our network research hub, or is one from the research network hub leadership sufficient? Do you think, you know, it's up to you what you put in. What we want to see is commitment, and through the letters of support and the example studies that you've been leading, we want to really be able to see that here's your catchment area, and we have a track record of working in this catchment area. We want to have some level of confidence that you will be successful in working with these partners in rural areas and recruiting participants and engaging the community and understanding the community's needs from these areas. So it's up to you what you submit, but in the end, we're evaluating essentially the level of confidence in the partnership. So that does it for the open questions. I think we'll be happy to stay on as more questions might come to mind. Just remain available for you.
There's an open question about when the recording will be available.
That is a question that I cannot answer, so I will punt it happily to Andrea.
The recording will be available. Ideally, our hope is that the recording will be available in the next week. We'll be sure to send a message out. If you've requested that your information be kept for future notices, we'll be sure to send that message out by way of your email. And it will be available on the program site and the Common Fund webpage.
Okay, so another question, would the CTSA apply, or can the partner PBRN apply? Essentially, the organization that's eligible is the organization that is part of the CTSA. It's an eligibility question. Is there specific guidance about what types of descriptive information about sites and populations should be included in the application? So we do ask for you to include information that characterizes the population that you would serve through the hub. And I think we ask to just emphasize the demographics of the catchment area. Just trying to go back to, as well as specifying the urban versus rural breakdown. The geography of the catchment area, the demographics would be nice, although I don't think we specifically called that out, but at least the rural versus urban breakdown. Okay, so there's another question. Michigan isn't on the list for rural areas. Is that affirmative if the state is not on the list, that it does not meet eligibility? That is correct. If the state does not meet the RUCA criteria, then organizations from that state will not be eligible. And again, just to emphasize, that's for the current ROA. Future opportunities aren't expected to be similarly limited. Can you say more about what innovative designs you will accept? Will most of these studies be clinical trials like RCTs, or other community-friendly designs will also be allowed, especially for D&I type studies? Is that dissemination and implementation type studies? Essentially, innovative study designs are just innovations that enable studies to be more likely to be successful in primary care settings. Decentralized, taking advantage of teleservices, digital technologies, pragmatic designs. These are the types of aspects we think of, leveraging EHR data where possible, patient portals, aligning research methods with the clinical workflow as much as possible. Those are the types of things that we think about. Can you further clarify the multiple applications response? The application should be separate and distinct. And the written response was that they must be scientifically distinct. This is an infrastructure ROA, so how do you define distinctness? That there is no overlap in network clinical sites. Yes, I would again ask others to weigh in, such as Amy, but my response to this is that the infrastructure would be distinct. And not necessarily, since this is more of an infrastructure ROA.
That's right. And please, I think it might be helpful also. I know you've said it a couple times, but just to reiterate that, pertinent to a couple of the other questions, that the rural limitation present for the current ROA will not apply for future ROAs for the program. Just want to make that clear. So a lot of questions about that.
Yeah, thank you. We do have a few more moments, so we'll stay around for a few more minutes if other questions come up. Where is the list of eligible states? So we actually have a question. So are we able to put a link in the chat? I think I'm able to do that. There is a question in the FAQ on the website that is under the eligibility tab. If you scroll kind of further down past the boilerplate eligibility section, you'll see which states are listed there. Okay, so there's another question. The 50% preference refers to percent of total catchment population residing in the RUCA 410 across all network sites. Correct. Yes, the 50% preference in terms of this would be how we would potentially triage applications for review. We would prioritize applications that have 50% or more of their catchment area residing in RUCA 410, codes 4 through 10 across all network sites. That's correct, and it's not limited to the state of the organization. All right, well, it looks like one more question. Is multi-site the same thing as multi-clinic? I would answer yes to this. I don't really know the context of the question. If there's more specificity in the context, I could give a better answer, but briefly, it would be the same. Oh, can you confirm again if all studies will be full clinical trials? Not necessarily. So we expect to be able to choose from interventional or observational studies initially. All right, well, we are at the end of the hour. Thank you for participating. Thank you for all the great questions. We understand that this initial effort that will serve as a pilot is a little bit more limited than what is possible, but we do have budget and time constraints, and appreciate everybody's understanding and look forward to partnering on future opportunities more broadly. If there are other questions, please do submit questions to the email address that's on the website. But we are here to answer questions as they come up, and we will also have another webinar next week on the 22nd at the same time. That concludes today's webinar. Thanks very much, everyone.